can keep trickling in. I like that I don't have to let people in this format. It's nice. So for anyone who doesn't know me, who's joined, I am the new associate director at Marlborough for alumni engagement. I'm part of the class of 09, and I'm really grateful for you all to be here tonight with us. Aiming High, for anyone who's not familiar, this is their first time joining, is our virtual alumni speaker series, where we love to highlight alums in all different parts of the world, industries, everything. So I'll first introduce Michele and Sabaah, and then we'll get into their careers and as filmmakers. So Michele Noble is a director, writer, and producer for film, theater, and television. At 19, while studying at USC's film school, she actually sold her first screenplay and joined the Writers Guild. And since then, she's won numerous awards for her work, and she continues to build community amongst social organizers and has linked arms in protest and has been inspired by civil rights icons John Lewis, Harry Belafonte, and Dolores Huerta in movements around Ferguson, Trayvon Martin, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, and Standing Rock. And in 2001, she garnered an Emmy nomination for her powerful documentary Reclamation, The Rise at Standing Rock, which she directed and produced. It has won 15 top jury prizes and earned 25 nominations on the film festival circuit. And Sabaah Folayan, I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, is a screenwriter, filmmaker, and public speaker. She made her directorial debut at the 2017 Sundance Film Festival with the feature-length documentary Whose Streets. It nominated for Peabody, Critics' Choice, Gotham, and NAACP awards. The film chronicles the experiences of activists living in Ferguson, Missouri, when Michael Brown Jr. was killed. Whose Streets was distributed theatrically by Magnolia Pictures, broadcast for television by POV, and is now streaming on Netflix for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. And in 2021, Sabaah wrote the series finale of HBO's Betty, a critically acclaimed comedy series about a crew of young female skateboarders in New York City. And her second feature documentary, Look at Me, XXXTENTACION, premiered at South by Southwest in 2022 and is now streaming on Hulu. So thank you guys so much for being here. Just to kick it off, I'd love for you guys to kind of jump in and share. We kind of were briefly talking about it a second ago, but how you got into this industry. You know, sometimes it isn't a direct path, and maybe there's a moment that inspired you to become filmmakers. So I'd love for you guys to share more about that. Michele, you want to go first?
Well, I think Sabaah's story is much more interesting than mine, actually, since I've heard it before. Mine, I wanted to do film since I was very young, since I was 5 years old. And I was fortunate enough to have a lot of people taking me to see films. And so I was just mesmerized by the whole experience. And I dreamed of directing very early. And when I went to USC Film School, there was a whopping 2 women in the directing program. And now I think there's many more. But my path was basically, direct from USC. While I was at USC, I was doing documentaries for network TV. And then I went from that to working as on set, really as a assistant director on features, mostly indie features. And then I joined the Directors Guild, directed a feature. And then I kind of did both narrative and documentaries. But my period of time as a woman, it was very difficult. And it was very alien to see women directing or being in the camera department, or, there was just hair, makeup, and wardrobe for women. And so Betsy Magruder and I were one of the 2 ADs that worked and now Betsy Magruder works for the Coen brothers. And so it's changed a lot. The landscape has changed. And when I joined the Directors Guild, I remember somebody saying to me, oh, you must be the secretary of the DJ in working as a DJ. And I said, no, I'm a director. And they just turn and walk away. And and that kind of thing. I mean, also every interview was like, how are you going to, be powerful, or how are you going to get men to listen to you on set? So that's, thank God, no more in the business. But that's kind of where I began.
Well,
Nice.
if you have any tips for how to get men to listen to you on set, please let's follow up. No, but just I have so much admiration for just that instinct to go against the grain, I think, and put yourself in that situation and sort of claim that space and trailblaze that space, so that when someone like me comes along, it's not the first time that they've ever seen a woman, try to take this on. I think for me, like, being a woman and being Black, I didn't really see a real place for myself and my voice. I think, like, at Marlboro, I was a big theater kid, but Marlboro's kind of theater culture just didn't really have anything to do with the world that I went home to. And there were fantastic teachers and fantastic performances, and all of my classmates were fantastic, but I just found myself consistently sort of being cast as like the tree or the monster, or like you know what I mean? Like, there just wasn't really a place for my authentic expression. And I think my desire to tell stories shifted away from acting for that reason. And I didn't really see, so I was pre-med, and I kind of had this idea that I would like write a manuscript. And in my mind, it was specifically called a manuscript. And it was like, I was going to be at a typewriter, like probably in a dark room with one light. And I was going to have this like one physical thing that was going to be like, you know what I mean, one day discovered and turned into, like, it was like a latent fantasy. But I felt like, I would just be pre-med, I would just get a secure career, really like, Marlboro is a place of excellence, like you've got to have some type of world-changing plan. I feel like leaving Marlboro, like it was like not an option. They were like, you guys are the leaders of the free world, like you guys are gonna take over. So I was really like high on those drugs, and I was like, all right, like go to this Ivy League school, do this pre-med thing, go to a med school, become a neurosurgeon. Like I just had this like kind of ambition that I felt like was the way for me to sort of be validated. And I didn't have that instinct to say, forget what other people want me to do or think is appropriate for me to do. I'm doing this, until I had gone through pre-med, graduated from Columbia pre-med, took the MCAT, and, was sort of hoping that maybe I wouldn't do well. But of course, that Marlboro education, the intense Marlboro education prepared me for any standardized test. And so it was just like, you have to make a decision at this point. Like, if you want a life that you enjoy and that you're passionate about, you have to actually step out on a limb and make a choice and do something that maybe everyone around you doesn't understand. Maybe they're not going to be accolades. Maybe it's not going to be the most glamorous thing. And so when Mike Brown Jr. was killed, I was working at a nonprofit. I had started to tiptoe toward public health as a way to kind of like use my pre-med background without necessarily being tied to that kind of system. And my job was ending, and Mike Brown was killed the same month. And so I thought that I would go to Ferguson and I would write about it. And I felt like I knew intuitively, and as a Black person, that what was being said on the news just wasn't quite incorporating all of the nuance of that situation, that really sensitive situation. I was seeing how polarized we all were becoming about it, and how little humanity was really present in that conversation. And so I went and I was like, I'm gonna like break this baby open, like with no journalistic skills, like no connections, like just no idea what I was doing. And so over the process of working at a nonprofit, I had started to learn about the idea of trauma-informed care. And it was a big trend in nonprofits in the mid 2010s to be trauma-informed. And so in the course of that process, I'd interviewed this reentry organization to help people coming from jails and prisons or who were in jails and prisons to try to just reintegrate and build skills, etc. Interviewed 200 employees, interviewed people in and out of jails and prison across New York State. And it was this sort of light bulb moment for me, because it was like, wow, like sitting down to have these sensitive conversations about people's unseen realities and the stories that they're carrying around with them in their everyday lives. Like, this is something that I can do. Like, everyone who I was interviewing, you know, it was really an organizational kind of assessment, but people were having these really resonant experiences in the conversation and saying that no one had ever asked them these types of questions. And a lot was just revealed. So when Mike Brown was killed, I was like, all right, I'm going to do these same types of interview, and I'm going to look at how trauma is playing out in these protests, because from a trauma lens, this is like PTSD everywhere. Like, this is like, you know, a public health nightmare, to be honest, for all of the people who are involved in any side of the situation, and especially those with the least amount of structural power. So I had a clipboard ready, and it was like, how's your mood since the protest began? Like, how's your appetite? And I get there, and it's just like tear gas is everywhere. Like, people are clashing. Like, there's just so much going on. Obviously cannot ask these multiple choice questions to these people in this moment. And a classmate of mine, Lucas Alvarado Ferrar, who's our cinematographer for Who Streets, was with me initially intending to take photos. And we just sort of looked at each other after about 15 minutes and were like, we just have to record this. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm like, you're in a whole nother state. Like, you have set yourself out on this mission. You just have to be bold. And it was actually my main protagonist, was one of the first people that I spoke to. And she said something that makes me think of your story, Michele. I was asking her, how do you find your place as a woman in the protest movement? And she said to me, you don't wait for anyone to give you your place. You take your place. And I've just, something like came over me in that moment, and I was like, this is it. And I just started learning everything that I could, recording everything that I could. And I was like, I don't know where this leads, but I know that there's an underside to the story that's not being told, and everyone's talking about it. So I think that my perspective deserves to be seen, you know, on the biggest platforms. And that was just my resolve. And then the sort of the universe and synchronicity and support and community filled in the gaps.
It's amazing. Yeah. Thank you, both of you. Yeah. I'd love to know, Michele, you know, based on what you said, how this was such a male dominated field when you started, and I think it still is. And then Sabaah too, from your first experience starting to do this type of storytelling on the ground like this and really learning as you go, how have you guys both seen your work evolve over time, whether that be your approach, your execution, how you decide to tell the story? Is it shoot first and then decide how to piece it all together later? Like, take us through that process for both of you and how it's changed over time.
I think how it's changed. I mean, for me, I always have to have, you want me to go first? I feel like I just jumped in there.
Yeah.
I didn't even ask permission there. I just went like, okay, for me. So,
no, you're the pioneer here. You get first dibs on the question.
I'm the old lady, so the old lady has to go first. Like for me, the political part is always there, and I'm fascinated by, you know, the unlikely hero in an impossible situation, doing incredible things. So I'm drawn to that, and it usually there's a historical nature to it. So like with Shining Rock, it's a historical event, and I would say how it's evolved over time is I respect more what I know I can do, so I relax. So how it's evolved over time is I'm even calmer than I was in the beginning, and I respect. Well, first you have to honor and respect the person, but what I heard from Sabaah, which was very interesting, at Marlborough, there is an excellence, and you are this perfectionist, whether you because that's there's a lot of A types there. So I mean, let's just say it. So, so you are a perfectionist. And I think when I first did it in my 20s, I really was so involved with how I was doing it, making sure it was like perfect. And then what happens is you realize it doesn't matter about the composition, doesn't have to be perfect. The, the lighting is fine. It's really about being in the moment with the people, and it's really about the silence. There's a lot of it's wonderful when you're talking and sharing with someone and they have a moment where they start to think about something greater than what you asked, and then they're building on that, and there's trust, and all of that happens in these silences. And then you see that you have to trust that something will come. You don't have to jump on it. You don't have to try to, be in it. You just have to move out. You have to get yourself so you're out of your own way. And that's what I realized, that I had to, and I think the more I knew, the more technically sound I was, and the more I did like editing and everything, I let go of some of that and let other people edit and let other people come to, and I didn't let myself understand that it's okay to do that, and it's actually better to do that. And so now I've collaborated with the same cinematographer on 4 or 5 things, and the same editor, and it's really great. And so I would say how it's evolved over time is that there's a lot of trust that I always had with the people I was collaborating with, the people that I was filming, the people that I was entering into their lives. That's always been something that's been great. But I didn't allow myself to just trust myself.
Mm.
Wow. That's really inspiring for me, actually, because I think that so Look at Me just premiered in March and got onto Hulu in May, and so I'm kind of in that like postpartum, post feature come down phase where I'm sort of synthesizing and reflecting. And I think when I started out with Who Streets, and I would say with Look at Me as well, like there was this organic way in which like everything that you're saying, I feel like that was all that I had, like because I didn't even have the pretense of any technical knowledge. I was sort of forced to really, really humble myself and say, what is it that I know that I can do, which is make real, organic, visceral connections with people. And the rest of it is just going to have to, just be the best that it can be. And I had to completely rely on, I have to big up my editor, Chris McNabb, because they were the only person on the team who had gone to film school. So I was running out and getting footage, and they're coming back, and they're like, you need B-roll. And I'm like, what's B-roll? You need establishing shots. Like the audio has to be good. I was like, learning like the absolute ABCs as I'm doing this. And so I think I naturally couldn't be a perfectionist, which was really hard. And I think it turned into a desire and an obsession with kind of reaching and proving some of those technical points, which I've then found myself creating limitations. And this is just making me think about, and it's something I've been thinking about for my last couple of projects, like how do I get back to what was really alive about just being outside, me and my DP, little DSLR, and that freedom and that agility. And it was only about the mission. It wasn't about anything else, because production can quickly become about everything but the storytelling. So, I mean, for me, it's still evolving. It's very much alive. I don't feel like I have a retrospective of myself, but I definitely resonate deeply with sort of that tension between, that interconnection that really is the substance of good storytelling, and then how you kind of balance all of the different aspects there are to control, and ways that you could, sort of prove yourself in this you know, because it is competitive. It's definitely
Mhm.
competition. You're constantly being judged and measured. I feel like there's the opportunity for glory, but then there's the opportunity to, you know, not be noticed, or, you know, unlike a lot of other, I think, jobs, like this is one of those ones where you really are dependent on feedback and approval for your livelihood. And so,
Yeah. Mhm.
um, yeah, I was just thinking about those dynamics.
Yeah, I would say especially too with both of you and the stories that you both tell are also very emotionally charged. And, you know, I think we were talking about this before, that you're telling stories of people's lives and all the good, the bad, everything in between, and really trying to find that balance where there could be the villain who we fall in love with, and then there's the hero who we see, you know, wasn't perfect. And it's like all these, it's like super complex, and I can imagine incredibly hard to put it all together. But we do have a question about any inspiration or mentors you've had along the way that have helped you. Sabaah, you mentioned Chris, but anyone else that you guys want to share, or anything else that really has helped you kind of hone your skill?
Well, I have tons. I mean, I was really lucky in that regard. I mean, I when I was in high school, I worked with Orson Welles, so that was incredible. And then later on, I got to know John Lewis, who was amazing, and I was he introduced me to Harry Belafonte, and and Theodore Bickel was a long time friend, and he was he knew Harry and John Lewis and Dr. King, and so there was always a political wash with that. And then for also um, John Hopkins, who wrote Smiley's People, was like a mentor of writing. So I didn't have women mentors, but I did have a lot of really progressive men mentors and a lot of political mentors. And then recently, I had met Dolores Huerta several times, and recently I spent like 5 or 6 hours with her talking about, you know, political activism and organizing around the world and stuff. And just the fact that she is 90 or 91 and goes all over the country doing amazing things. I mean, I was blown away. So I felt like, you know, that helps, I think, not only like a constant mentor in your life, but
Mhm.
then people who are, you know, these inspiring people that you get to interview or talk to. Gloria Steinem I recently spoke to, and so these kind of people, you say, okay, this is, you know, I should continue to do what I'm doing. I should continue to um, you know, to make the work happen in an honorable way. And that's the hardest thing, because like Sabaah says, you know, people are looking at your work and tearing it up and, you know, criticizing it or whatever, but you have to honor it. And so Standing Rock was very interesting in terms of how I realized that all the mentorship and all everything had led me really to Standing Rock, and everything had I was there and able to be in that space and for that period of time. And it was like unlike any other documentary for me, because I came as an ally, and then you were on the front lines. There was no sort of like, oh, I'm over here just witnessing this. You were active in all of it. And um and I think also the decision to just have it be the native voice, and not the allies, and not the police, and not the mercenaries, and not the pipeline guys, I feel was the right move for mine, because the native voice needed to be front and center, and also we needed to understand you know, historically what was happening before that pipeline.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to know, you know, that you can have all these mentors in the space that aren't filmmakers, but they are so well connected to storytelling and to advocacy and all of these other issues that you're trying to shed light on. So thank you, Michele. What about you, Sabaah?
It's way more people that I could possibly name. I think, you know, like, so I'm such a product of community. I would say definitely Chris, my editor. There was a woman named Loida Limbao who is a Puerto Rican filmmaker. Her most recent feature is called Through the Night, and it's about a 24-hour daycare center in the Bronx. And it's just a really beautiful tribute to motherhood and childcare, and, you know, just an aspect of women's lives and family life that doesn't really get that much attention. I feel like you would love it. And she was formerly the director of the Firelight Media Documentary Lab, which is an 18-month fellowship for first and second time feature filmmakers of color. And so she was just a person who, you know, knew. She had made a feature before called Beyond Beats and Rhymes, which is one of the best documentaries about just the birth of hip hop and the involvement of Puerto Rican and Caribbean cultures in, you know, the mix and the diaspora that went into the creation of hip hop. And she was just always there as a mentor, always really real and raw. And so actually at this point, I'm the interim director of that same program as she shifted into her filmmaking. I am running that doc lab as they find their next cohort. So I think this filmmaking practice, especially for women and people of color and voices that are not centered in our society, it really, really comes out of mentorship. You know, Ava like actually is accessible and will pick up the phone. We'll answer a phone call and we'll give advice, which is amazing to be able to say. I think Issa Rae was like probably the first time I saw someone that I was like, that's me. Like when I saw Awkward Black Girl, the YouTube series, I was like, this is like, wait, you know, it was just a game-changing moment because I had never seen someone that I could really, really personally, like literally, I think she was just coming out of Stanford. Like it was like such a close resonance. And yeah, just within my own life, like I could just name dozens and dozens of people who take me under their wing. Every time I like apply for a grant, I've got like a board of 10 people that I send my applications to. I'm like, what do you think? Like it's a whole committee over here.
That's nice. Yeah, it definitely takes, I'm sure, a lot of people, and even just not even in the work side of it, but in the postpartum side that you said, like in the come down of it. Like I'm sure there's people that you know you can be with in those times where you're just trying to decompress from all of that focus and energy that you put into the work. Someone asked, Sabaah, you mentioned how quickly, you know, the story can become about something else, like all of these other factors. How do you stay focused on it? And both of you, of course, can answer this, but how do you bring it back to that, you know, goal and that mission?
I mean, it's really like kind of an esoteric practice. Like I've learned more and more that I have to have routines and regimens and rituals like meditation, like journaling. You know, I'm like, my therapist recommended this and I started doing it, like burning cedar after doing interviews so that I could, like, as a way to sort of clear others' energy and be centered in my own energy and create separation between the stories that I'm telling and have, you know, inner boundaries so I can keep track of my own voice. I create an advisory board for each film that I do, who are people that, you know, have either expertise in the topic or, you know, for whatever their expertise is that are going to hold me accountable to the mission and are going to give me critical feedback and evidence-based feedback. But it's really, I think I've heard it said, and I believe it to be true, that each film that you make is really about yourself. And I think the most important thing is to be in touch with the story that you're telling yourself about what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing. Because I think that, you know, it can become about I think it's important to know that it is about your career and that it is about your success and that it is about your reputation, and actually be really centered in that, because when you feel like you're there to sort of save, or like, I thought Who Streets was going to say like change the world, and I was sorely disappointed, because I had just positioned myself as a savior and dramatically overestimated my own significance in the greater picture of humanity. And when it became so for me, like, it became about, okay, can I reflect these people's story back to them in a way that they're proud of? Can I maintain the respect and the integrity of these relationships from start to finish in this process? And I think that's really what I come back to when I do have to sort of push back, or make sure that the values aren't being compromised. I come back to the integrity of the relationship that I have with the people who are collaborating with me to tell this greater truth about themselves and their lives that I wouldn't otherwise be able to access. But yeah, I'm very curious, Michele, to hear how you stay on track.
Well, it's interesting when you say that you meditate and you journal. I do a lot of, how I stay centered is research, and then moving myself in the field. I spend a lot before I film anything, I spend a lot of time just there, myself, and in really quiet contemplation, and then talking to everyone before I even if I get excited and I say, oh my God, that's really great, that's a great shot, oh, and that's an amazing moment, and I really resist doing anything until I really see it. And then it's what you were saying, then it's like, focus, and and mission, like that, I think is a really good word. It's like you are on your mission, and then it becomes endurance and keeping yourself physically able to, and mentally alert, so that you don't get so tired and so overwhelmed that you don't understand and you disrespect the people that you're collaborating with. And so it's really about honoring. When you go to speak to anybody, it's about honoring that person and honoring what they're saying, and then they see that immediately, and you're, I don't know about you, but there's always a moment, whether it's in the editing room or there, usually it happens there, where I say to myself, this we're having this connection, we're having this moment, and I realize the power of it. What they have done is this: they've given you this, you know, this very intimate thing, and now you have this responsibility, and it's funny because you ramp up to that moment where you want the truth, you want that intimate thing, and now you have it all, and or their truth, the 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 moment, and then that's when you have to start making decisions where,
Mhm.
like you said, where you are with that. And so for me, it's always about making honoring the person and making the decision that I would want to make, and that may or may not be the most greatest career path. I mean, if you told me that Standing Rock was going to get nominated, I would laugh, you know, because that was never my goal. What my goal was to get the message out, to get the what had happened out, to have it documented, and to get what these young folks, and what I really liked is these two generations, the young people and the grandparents who had gone through the Indian schools and everything. And I wanted to get that. And I had no thought that it would, I just wanted it to be as good as I could make it. And then it goes out. So I don't ever, it's good to hear, to to think about how it's going to be received and where the career is going. And maybe I gave that more thought earlier on. I would have to reflect hard on that, but don't really think so. I think I've always been sort of, it goes out and whatever it does, it does.
That's good. Yeah, I can see how that leading to more success anyway, not focusing on how it's going to be received and where it might take you, but more about, telling the story and staying true to that. And I love that you have an advisory, Sabaah. That's great. Just holding yourself accountable. So there's a couple more questions from the guests, but I just want to ask this first about your decision to make a film and to tell a story. How do you grapple with that and what you're going to tell? And if you want to agree to it, I saw in one interview, Sabaah, that you did where you had a hard time deciding with Look at Me, and, there might be various reasons for that. So, Michele, you mentioned you go and you sit there and you see what's going on first before you decide what's next. So you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but then when is that moment where you're like, yes, I have to tell this story, or yes, I know how I'm going to do this? Sabaah, if you want to kick us off with this one.
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, for me, the process is like quite esoteric, because when I started this, I was, still pre-med. I'd taken the MCAT. There's 3 years that the scores are valid for. And actually my year was like the year that they were going to overhaul the format. So none of the prep that I had done was going to be useful if I had to retake it. So it was like this ticking clock. And I'm not someone who comes from a lot of economic means. So a lot of times I'm in a position where I have to do this work to survive. And so that definitely plays a factor. I'm also in a position where I don't want to be pigeonholed into only talking about criminal justice or African American issues specifically. And so that plays a factor. And then I'm pulled and drawn towards certain things. And I think with the X documentary, I had that background in mental health. I had that experience with people who were inside the criminal justice system. And I also really passionately wanted to be able to tell the survivor's story and be able to sort of debunk the idea that coming forward about domestic violence or sexual violence, whatever the case may be, has some benefit to women. Because I think that that's like one of the myths that flies around, that first of all, that there is such a thing as cancel culture, because what we know, what the evidence shows, is that people who are quote unquote canceled, often the controversy lends to more exposure, more financial gain for those people. And then and there's a tremendous backlash to women who come forward. And so for me, it's always measuring so many different factors and trying to be honest. And I love the idea and the feeling of being like, it's just about getting the story out there. It's just about doing the right thing. But it's not just about that for me. The ambition that drew me to Columbia, that drew me to pursue, like the most challenging stream of medicine, that is still within me. That's still part of who I am. And I think that like sometimes I just have to I think it's important ethically for me to be really, really honest with myself about that and to allow myself to have that. You know what I mean? Like that's not an ugly thing, as long as one is being accountable and honest and open. So it's like a big mathematical process, but the esoteric part comes in because like when I was making Who Streets, like I was sleeping on couches, like I was like doing all types of weird, odd jobs. Like at one point I was the person who's like with the, you know, canvassing with the clipboard, like, hey, do you want to talk about water today? Like, I was just doing whatever it was I had to do. And I was literally praying. I was like, I'm big on like talking to my ancestors, and I'm literally like, ancestors, I will do all of the work. Like, just please guide me and like make this path open up. And I think for me, like my moment, the moment that I always wait for or look for is like the path opening up in ways that feel sort of synergistic or bigger than me. You know what I mean? It like sometimes I almost feel like I'm being like in the projects I'm really meant to do, like I'm being pulled along with a little bit of like reluctance and resistance, but there's something in me that feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That feels like everything that I've done has prepared for this moment, even if it's like, you know, like if I would have had my way, I would have told like some cool sci-fi Fifth Element, like badass fun story. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know, it's a bit of a gumbo of like ways to choose, but I think ultimately that gut feeling has to be there that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that's how I kind of mitigate the like part of me that wants to just do the best thing or the shiniest thing or the biggest thing that I can do.
Yes. And Michele, you mentioned that too, that you felt that all of your experiences, your mentors, the conversations you've had with people prepared you for that moment at Standing Rock. So maybe you can touch on that.
I would say Sabaah is really, you know, I mean, I'm learning quite a bit here. I love this. I would say I would totally agree that the gut is how you ultimately pick it, because there's a lot of people, you know, I mean, I'm sure in my life, and there's a lot of people in Sabaah's life too, and you get people pitch you stuff and they say, you know, and then you find yourself in situations where you go, oh, that's interesting or whatever. And then there's the thing that hits you and you say, oh yeah, I want to go there. That's what I want to do. And you don't even sometimes know how you want to frame it or what you want to do with it, but you know, like I'm going on that journey over here. And then you know, for me, you start doing research, start meeting people, you start like really feeling it. And I want to say quickly on the career thing, I think career thing is great. I love a good career. You know, I love, as my son says, you really like to win awards. Yes, I do. I really do. I do. I am not adverse to that. And I would like, you know, and I think that that's very good to think of it. And I think the only reason I don't, and I should, and now from this dialogue that we're having here, from this conversation, I am now going to be more career present, because you know, I do think about it, but I think I think about it late. I think for me, it's really when you know, when it's edited all together and I'm trying to sell it. I think that's when I start thinking about it.
And I mean,
yeah,
and I think you're right that you should think about it as little as possible, and it absolutely can't be first. Like with the X documentary, the conversations that I had with my editor, we were like, if we can't execute this according to our values, we have to walk away. And that was just the part, you know, and I desperately wanted to have a second feature done, but that was always, you know, that was the agreement that I had with myself and with my editor, that we could not compromise our values. So I do think it's definitely a balance, and there's definitely something really essential about doing the thing for the thing itself, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Spike Lee gave a great interview when he was doing Malcolm X, and he said just that. He said, if I can't pull this off, then forget it. I'm just not going to do a movie. I'm going to do it this way. And if I can't do that, and I love, you know, Four Little Girls, he had the same thing, you know, where he talked about that. And that was the cinematographer on that was Ellen Curris, and I worked with her, and we talked a lot about that, about, you know, if you can't, yes, this is great, but if you can't pull it off, if you can't honor it. If you can't get it right, then you really shouldn't do it for the wrong reasons, you know.
Mhm.
And career is not a wrong reason. Career is a very good reason. And it's good to have, you know, and I like the idea of a committee. I have kind of like an, you know, not a formal committee. I have the, you know, I do a lot of research and interview and stuff like that. So I have the, you know, the help, the folks that the community that I build before I film. But I like this idea of a formal committee. I'm learning a lot here.
I love it.
So
Great.
I really enjoy this. This is really good for me. Thank you, Natalie.
Good.
Well, thank you guys. I mean, you're the ones sharing everything. So a question from someone who is just starting in filmmaking, and they, you know, you guys have worked across disciplines, writing, producing, directing. And as somebody who is interested in production design, but also directing, what advice would you share with them about moving across different, I guess, areas in the filmmaking process? Has that been seamless for you guys? Have you found any tips or tricks or difficulties in that, you know, and not just sticking to one maybe path within filmmaking? Either of you want to share?
I feel like Michelle probably will have deeper insight. For me, my network has been everything, and just being really clear on like the story that I shared about kind of my origin story. I've shared 1,000 times, and I share whenever I, you know, talk to someone new about me as a filmmaker, because it gives you so much information about who I am, what my priorities are, what my approach is. And so when you can make yourself as a filmmaker, as a storyteller clear by, you know, having a like succinct and well-formulated articulation of your trajectory, it allows people, it helps people to imagine what other things that you might, you know, be capable of. Like people are, it's not just about the hard skills that you have, it's also about who you are. And people are always looking for people that, you know, are heart centered and that they want to work with and want to be around. So I think that, you know, just communicating yourself to the people around you and letting people know your story and what you're about, if you want to be moving through different disciplines, is really helpful.
Yeah, I think I have to second that too. I think the mistake people make is not saying everything they want to do. And I think first you have to make connections with other filmmakers or whatever that you know, in your job. Let's say you're a production designer and you're working. It's always good to, after a while, when you feel like very connected with the community that you're working with, to say, look, I want to direct, I want to do this, so that people then start thinking, oh, okay, great. So, you know, and they recommend you, and then you move that way. And that's how you move between things, is just always putting it out there. You don't like say it in, you know, immediately, because it freaks people out sometimes when they're hiring you as a production designer or as a director, and you say, I also want to do this. Then they go, uh-oh, you know, how many things are they going to do? But now everyone's a hyphen, because you have to be. And I think production designer, director is great. People, that's a combination that people really, really like, because production design is so visual, and you can see how much you contribute to the director, to the vision of that. And that's great. That's a great combo. And I think people are very, very for that. There's a lot of, I know lots of production designers that have moved between directing and production design.
Amazing. Thank you.
Shadowing, I'm a big fan. When I mentor people now, mentor young women now, I basically say, shadow, if you can get to shadowing, if you want a production design, shadow a production designer. If you want to direct, shadow directors, and get into, if you're, you know, if you haven't done a lot, shadowing on shows or features or indies or whatever is like, it's, people are really up for it now, and they will actually even pay for your time sometimes. So that's really good, much better than working as, you know, a PA on something, try to get a shadowing position.
Yeah. And then, you know, just before we wrap up, I'd love to hear what you guys are working on now, the future of both of you, what you're hoping maybe to work on, or anything you guys would like to share that we can look forward to.
Go ahead, Sabaah.
So there's something that I always dread about this question, but I'm leaning into writing more, as well as I want to do a historical doc. Like I want to do kind of an essay style, retrospective style film, because I haven't worked in that format yet. Everything has been super modern and like social media driven. And so I want to try my hand at that, and also just mentoring, teaching. I'm always going to be a teaching artist and a mentoring artist. I find that sort of selfishly, it allows me to really kind of get a better vantage point on my own work, but also just, you know, so much deep gratitude for the way that community and mentorship has brought me this far. So that's also a big part of it.
Nice. Exciting.
I have to say, I dread this question as well, because I'm always like, well, you know, once you say it, you feel like, oh, now it's not going to happen. So,
I mean, and the truth is, we all have.
Yeah.
The truth is, we all have like 75 maybe
75
things simmering at once, and we don't know which one's gonna, you know, come out next or first.
Exactly. And I would say, projects wise, yeah, I have a couple of documentaries, and then I have right now a television series that's a historical drama based on the French Resistance. And we all think that the French Resistance was actually came about through a bunch of guys, but no, it was a bunch of women, and it was a bunch of women who were artists, so even more interesting. And again, unlikely heroes in an impossible situation doing incredible things. So there we go. And for me, I love mentoring. I think it's like it's really not only important, but it's so great, because it really puts you in a place where you start really thinking about yourself and your work, and also you have input on other perspectives and other things that you hadn't ever considered. So I love that. But yeah, and I also think it's healthy, and I would say to the Marlboro folks, it's very healthy to be in. I'm in a writers group once a week, and we have goals that we say that we're going to do, and then you have 10 people looking at you saying, okay, did you meet your goals? So I think it's very healthy to be find a group of people that will hold you accountable to your creative endeavors, because as an artist, you can really just get into a situation where you just think of a lot, but you don't complete. So there is the complete it, come on, get to it. And not in a safe, beautiful way, to have a community that reflects you and nurtures you and pushes you and kicks you in the ass.
Well, on that note, absolutely. I agree. And that's wonderful. Thank you both so much. This was a wonderful conversation. And it was just great to hear from both of you. I would love for you guys to share where people can find you or connect with you, whether it's your website or social media. And then just so everyone knows, the recording of this will be on Marlboro's YouTube channel, which is on the alumni page under Aiming High on our website. But yeah, if Michele, if you'd like to go first, share your website or anywhere else.
Yeah, MicheleNoble.com, and the Reclamations, my film is reclamationthefilm.com, and look for it next year. It's going to be in a longer format, probably.
Nice.
Some of the streamers.
Nice.
So,
my website is sabaah.is, and social media is just my name at Sabaah Folayan. So you can pretty much find me in those ways. Thank you so much for having us, Natalie. Please,
Yes.
can we get your skincare routine in the chat or something? I need it.
oh my
I
God,
need
you're
it.
so funny. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
I agree.
Talk to you
You know.
very soon. I hope to see you guys in person too as well very soon.
Yes.
Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you.